Good evening from the KLRU studios at the University of Texas campus in Austin, and welcome to the 2010 Governor's Debate. I'm your moderator, Christy Hoppy, Austin Bureau Chief of the Dallas Morning News. Tonight we have three candidates seeking to lead the state through the next 4 years. We are pleased to be joined by Democratic nominee Bill White, Libertarian Party candidate Kathy Glass, Green Party candidate Deb Shafto. Regrettably, incumbent Governor Rick Perry has declined to join us for this debate, and for that I believe we are all the poorer. But quickly, let me go over the rules of this evening. Questions will be asked in a round robin to rotate who gives the first answer. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the same question, and I'll work to enforce that time limit with the help of our timekeeper, Lupe Sosa. In the last few minutes, we'll go to a lightning round where the pace will pick up and candidates will be giving quick and hopefully short answers. At the end, each candidate will have a 2-minute closing statement. So with much to cover, let me introduce the panelists who will get the questions started. I'm pleased to be joined by Peggy Fekak, Austin Bureau Chief of the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News, Dave Montgomery, Austin Bureau Chief of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Alberta Phillips, editorial writer and columnist for the Austin American-Statesman. Alberta has the first question for Mayor White.
Good evening. Mayor White, last week, officials in Georgia voted to bar illegal immigrants from attending the state's 5 most selective public universities and colleges. By contrast, Texas permits illegal immigrant students who graduate from Texas public schools to pay in-state tuition and receive financial aid. More than 12,000 illegal immigrant students are benefiting from that law, which Governor Rick Perry signed into law and continues to support. Given the competition for seats at selective Texas public universities and colleges, the higher demand for financial aid, and our economic downturn, should Texas maintain or repeal that law, and why?
I think it's in our interest if all our residents are as educated and well-trained as they possibly can be. I think we all benefit when people reach self-sufficiency and can take care of themselves. And we know that people are more educated, can make more money, invest more money, and spend more money. Now, I do fault the governor for not enforcing the terms. We learned in the primary debates earlier this spring that he thought that a state agency under his control was monitoring whether they were seeking legal residency, which was a requirement of the law. We need a governor who will pay attention to enforcing our laws as written, not somebody who just goes off and gives speeches and sound bites. I think one consequence, one result of having a governor who spends an average of about 8 hours a week on state work is that we get a lack of administration of the laws that we do pass, and we need to change that. We need to make sure in this state that every student has a potential to go on. Education is so important, but we see for the first time that workers that are under 35 years old, between 25 and 35, have a smaller percentage of college diplomas than those who are in 35 to 45, 45 to 45, 45 to 55. That trend has to stop, and it will if I'm governor.
Thank you. Ms. Glass, the question to you.
Well, my #1 platform is to secure our border using our own Texas State Guard, and part and parcel of that is to eliminate all taxpayer-funded services to non-citizens, and that would include any type of state aid for college tuition or anything that they get or seek from the state. In fact, this is such an important issue to me that I have prepared a letter to get a strongly worded letter, which I will give to Governor Perry the next time I see him, outlining his duties as Commander-in-Chief under our Texas Constitution to use our Texas military, which includes our State Guard, and to defend that border. We have budgetary problems that are serious and going to get worse. These taxpayer-funded services going to non-citizens is over 25% of our $180 billion budget. We have to take these measures to get our fiscal house in order so that we can stand strong and independent of Washington financially in all ways.
Thank you. Ms. Shafto?
While I agree that we need to get our fiscal house in order, I think doing it on the backs of young people who are striving to make a better life, and as Mayor White said, will make a better life for all of us here in Texas, I think is a very big mistake. There are places, many places, in the state budget where we can make cuts that don't affect our young people and certainly don't put such a disadvantage on our immigrant population. They need to be educated. We need to have them educated, and they are willing. We didn't force them to go. They're anxious. They're education oriented. Let's let them have it.
Peggy, the next question.
Ms. Glass, the latest report from the Texas Workforce Commission shows there are more than 1 million unemployed Texans. Do you personally know anyone who is unemployed? And can you name a specific proposal that would put people back to work in Texas?
Yes, I know people who are unemployed. I know people who are underemployed. I know people who have given up looking, and so they don't even show up in those statistics that you mentioned. We have a serious problem in Texas, and it may seem that we are comparatively better off, but it is not in absolute terms where we can be or should be, and it's going to get worse. The things we must do is to get our budget in shape. I would cut the budget 50% in one half. That will put us back where we were roughly 10 years ago, and just shows how much government has grown. The cost of government has exploded under a conservative, supposedly conservative administration. We need to end property taxes and end franchise taxes. In the Sunday Houston Chronicle, Governor Perry said that he wanted another business tax, and we have Republicans calling for statewide property tax, and yes, they want an income tax. So they're going to use this budget problem as an opportunity to institute taxes that they wanted all along, and we've got to guard against that and stop that. But another thing we can do and must do, in addition to getting our budget into shape, is to revise some of these occupational licensing laws, things that really don't make much sense and are barriers, lots of red tape that keep people that are out of work from setting up their own business, doing what they used to do for somebody else. They should be allowed to go out and just start offering those services themselves, and we need to clear the barriers that prevent them from doing that. So there's many things we can do, but first we must recognize that we're not in nearly as good a shape as we're being told by our government about Texas finances.
Thank you. Ms. Shafto, the same question.
The problem as I see it is that there is so much money at the top and so little at the bottom that there's very little opportunity for small business people to actually get started. Small business people depend on people at the bottom end of the economic level to use their business and to make profit for them. What I would do is take state funds, and I have a place to get them. I would take state funds and start massive public works program, putting people to work. One of the things we dearly need is a power grid, bringing the power that we can generate from wind and sun from North Texas down to the areas where it's needed. Additionally, there's research work for scientists, engineers, all kinds of people to develop solar power. Caltech has found a substance that is efficient for solar collection, but it's very expensive yet. It will get less expensive as we work on it. We need to put the work into it. We need to put the investment into it. This is our chance to leave the air polluting kinds of energy we've been generating and go into clean energy, putting our people to work and we could become the leader in clean energy. We could be supplying energy for the entire Southwest. We have enough sun and wind to do it. All that we lack is the will and the manpower to get it going. The manpower we have, so what's left? It's the will to do it.
Mayor White?
Absolutely, and I know people are unemployed, and I'll tell you, it was about a week ago, I was in Tyler and met with a whole group of people, Texans, who had lost their jobs at the Goodyear plant. That was the largest private employer in town. They knew that Rick Perry was operating in a different world when he says that everything is great about the Texas economy, where 1 million people are unemployed for the first time, where our unemployment rate is higher than in neighboring states, an unemployment rate almost double that it was when Rick Perry took office. And this is what they told me. They had read about the outrages where Rick Perry had used the Enterprise Fund and the Emerging Technology Fund to make payments to companies that were owned by friends and donors. They recounted how that their plant had requested assistance from the governor's office to keep that plant in. But apparently none of them were big donors who could have the hand-picked funds, be one of those hand-picked firms that got taxpayer money for subsidies that was tax firms that were run by donors. And you saw the abuses. Rick Perry won't even release the names of the investors in those funds which got subsidies. Now look, as governor, I will run the whole unemployment insurance system different. I will plan for the future. We've seen unemployment payroll taxes almost more than double for some firms and almost double for most firms this year because Rick Perry failed to plan ahead. That's a direct tax on employment. That's bad for business and jobs.
Next question, Dave.
Yes, the state's budget problems has generated new momentum behind proposals to expand gambling in Texas. Proponents say that the state could raise several $billion in much-needed new revenue each year by legalizing casinos and by permitting slot machines on racetracks. Would those proposals have your support? And Mrs. Shafto, you get the answer first.
Not. I think it's sleazy, to say the least, when you are taking people who don't know what the odds are and trying to get them to finance the state. There are better ways to raise tax money. We have a lot of very wealthy people in Texas. Let's have an income tax on the top 20%. Top 20%, going from 1% to 3% only, would raise $10.1 billion a year. That's the budget deficit right now. That would give us breathing room to look at other problems and other solutions. It is high time that people who gain the most from this society start paying the most. As this tax structure is now, as regressive as it is, the top 20% pay roughly 3% of their income in taxes. The bottom 20 pay roughly 12%. That means that a family earning $30,000, that's the poverty level, family of four earning $30,000 pays $3,600 a year in taxes in the state of Texas. That is way too much. And that means that somebody at that earning level is not providing the food they might for their family, or the clothing, or the shoes, or the educational tools that the children need. You're at $87,000 a year. The tax on that would be $870. That's not insurmountable. That's not a huge burden. We need to start looking for where the...
Mayor White, would you support expanding gambling in Texas?
You know, the governor itself doesn't make that law. That would require a constitutional amendment. And I'm not going to be a governor who goes around saying that we ought to promote gambling as a way to balance a budget. Because after all, you know, we could run the state government so much more efficiently. It's gone up. The spending has gone up by 80% under Rick Perry. Debt has almost gone up by 2.5 times under Rick Perry. We can do better with the state budget than gambling. Now, I know that there's people, sooner or later, I believe, that the Texas voters, just based on what I hear out on the campaign trail, will want an opportunity to vote on that. I think there'll be that opportunity at some time. But I will tell you this, I heard a commercial. It was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, where there was a couple who was discussing Christmas gifts, and it was put on by the state lottery, and so it was encouraging people to buy lottery tickets, expensive lottery tickets, as a Christmas gift. This was put on by the state of Texas. This was promoting gambling by the state of Texas. I don't believe in that. I do think that I hate to see all that money going to Louisiana, Oklahoma, and other states, just like you know, most Texans do. And I think there ought to be a way to stop some of that.
Mrs. Glass?
Well, it's hard for me to criticize someone who purchases a lotto ticket with their own money. I mean, if you've looked at your 401k statement lately, you might think that they actually made the better choice. I would not be in favor of legalizing gambling for the purpose of raising revenue, because it's not that we tax ourselves too little, it's that we spend too much, and we need to cut the spending, as I've outlined, 50% by the ways that I've outlined. We need to understand that if the legislature passed a law legalizing gambling, I would find that I would sign that law because that's what they want, but not for the purposes of raising revenue. If that's where they're going, I would say let's work another way. We'll work on the spending levels, because I personally find that gambling is a weakness and something that you should not fund your government with. Now, our liabilities are serious, and so we need to find serious ways to get a handle on this. The unfunded liabilities, the things that are really not on the budget, is about $193 billion in Texas. That comes to $7,700 per person. These are things we're not even talking about. We're acting as though the only thing we've got staring us in the face is this $24 billion projected shortfall for the future, and we're not even talking about the actual shortfall, the deficit we have for this budgetary year, where we're in the hole and getting deeper.
The next question is from Peggy to Mayor White.
Mayor White, you and others have been highly critical of Governor Perry on a multitude of issues. From your point of view, has he done anything positive in nearly a decade as governor? And if so, what would that be?
Oh, how long do we have to think about that? You know, look, I think Rick Perry does believe in many things that many Texans believe in. We believe in work and opportunity, not handouts or entitlements. I'm trying to review now, you know, some of his careers. I think that there are times where that has preceded him have been visited our military when they are deployed abroad or when they come back. I certainly did that as mayor, where he represents at that time all Texans, and we respect the office of governor. Those are some of the things, but my problem is a lack of leadership and direction of this state. This state needs a governor who will move the state forward, who will build consensus. Our current governor thinks that leadership is all about dividing people into red teams and blue teams and no teams at all, green teams and other teams, and playing people off against each other. But we will never move our state forward with that kind of leadership. It's about theater as opposed to management. We need more solutions. If we're going to prepare our citizens to compete for good jobs in the world economy, we have to do a better job in our public schools, cut our dropout rate, make college more accessible, and bring high-wage jobs, not these minimum wage jobs, to Texas.
Ms. Glass, same question.
Well, I've heard that Governor Perry keeps like a 7-hour day, or maybe 7 hours a week, I forget, schedule, and I think that's good. If he were full-time, I don't know what shape the state would be in. And he's a pretty good shot, so I hear, if it's not shooting back. But getting back to where I really fault him is the #1 duty that I see in these times is as Commander-in-Chief of our Texas military. Now that may seem like a throwback to times past, but times have come around, and we're at that place again where he needs to assert leadership as head of our Texas military, which includes the State Guard. And that's something that he could do today. It's under the total control of the governor, and that he should put the Guard down at the border and to assist in the enforcement of Texas state law and part of what is an invasion. So that's where he talks about it. He talks about the problems down on the border, and that's good. So I will give him that. He does talk about it and talk. And then he begs Washington to come down here and defend us. Well, that doesn't get the job done, and that does not fulfill his obligations as governor of Texas. I have, in this letter, I will tell you that I have outlined to him what I think he has done that is in dereliction of his duty, what may be the most important duty of a governor in present times.
Ms. Shafto?
Well, that's a really hard question to answer. I don't want to appear too negative, but I can't think of anything offhand. As a teacher, I'm certainly not pleased with what's happened with the Teachers Retirement Fund or the State Board of Education. I'm heard from many, many people around the state how wonderfully popular his Route 69 is. All in all, I can't think of a single thing. I'm sorry.
The next question is for Dave.
Yes, well-publicized problems in the state's criminal justice system are raising new questions about the death penalty in Texas. There have been more than 40 cases in which inmates were wrongfully convicted and later exonerated, including one on death row. Additionally, a court of inquiry was held last week in Austin to determine if a flawed arson investigation led to the wrongful execution of Cameron Todd Willingham of Corsicana. In light of all that, should capital punishment be continued in Texas? And if it is, should there be new safeguards to prevent the execution of an innocent person?
Ms. Glass?
There can be no more serious responsibility of a governor than his or her role in the death penalty. I'm in favor of the death penalty, or I have been in times past, but now I've seen how it works and how there are some flaws in it. And I think we should take the time that we need. As governor, I would take all the time I thought I need. I'm a lawyer. I review transcripts. I would read the transcript myself and be satisfied that we had tried and convicted a person based on solid evidence, solid science, and that there was really no doubt that this person was guilty of the crime committed. And I would never say that innocence has been waived or has had its due. If there is a question about innocence, then we should examine it right now. So I would find it hard as a juror, given what we know about some of the flaws in the judicial system. I would find it hard personally to vote for a death penalty in almost any case. So this is something we've got to get right. It's very serious, and I don't have a joke to tell about this subject, because I fear that we have put some innocent people to death, and that's one of the worst things that can weigh on the governor or on us as a society.
Mrs. Shafto, your views?
I feel very much against the death penalty altogether. I think it's much too drastic. I think that there is no recall from it, whether you've made a mistake or not a mistake. What you've done is cheapened the entire society by saying this is how we deal. First of all, take the economic expense. It is enormously expensive to execute somebody. You could keep them in prison for life at much less. And the juries around the state have agreed with me as that new life without parole has become possible. People are choosing that because the courtroom drama is just a drama. Nobody will ever know what the real facts are. We just have some evidence to go on. And that is not enough to take a life. And even that is based on that's what you should do. It certainly does not act as a deterrent. In Texas, we kill more people than any place. Does that mean that Texans are worse than any other people who live in any other state? Why are so many people killed in Texas? It is not a deterrent. As a matter of fact, what the research shows is that every time somebody's executed, the level of crime takes a bump. People are upset by it, and reasonably so. It's not a practice that we as a civilized people should be engaging in.
Mayor White?
I support the death penalty, and I think it should be fairly administered, and by and large, in our criminal justice system it is. But there are cases where there is some suspicion or new evidence or forensic evidence that's under attack. And in those cases, we need to make clear. We need to make sure that there are process of appeals and reviews, including the Board of Pardons and Paroles and the Governor's Office that takes a look at that new evidence. Look, I think that victims are often neglected in the criminal justice system. There's been the most basic right of all is to be free from violence for others, is to be secure in your person and property. And I think victims, for good reason, understand that retribution is one part. Having a justice is one part of a criminal justice system. As governor, I would do what I did as mayor when I got to be mayor, and I found that there were cases where forensics were under question. We took a look at those cases and went through the DNA lab and identified those cases, and in 2 cases we had people who were exonerated because we went through that. But I don't think you should put a moratorium on all. And finally, I want to tell you that in this state we need to do a better job in our criminal justice system overall. Too many people do not have opportunities when they leave prison, and then they go right back.
Alberta will ask the next question.
Ms. Shafto, our share the wealth financing system for public schools is about to collapse under its own weight from too many Band-Aid fixes that have not provided a long-term, efficient, and sustainable source of financing for our public schools. Most Texans would agree that it shifts too much of the burden for paying for our schools onto local property taxpayers. And State Senator Steve Ogden, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, has proposed asking voters for a statewide property tax that would significantly reduce local property taxes and eliminate the so-called Robin Hood provision that requires wealthy districts to share some of its local tax revenues with poorer districts. If you are elected governor, would you support that initiative? If not, what would be your solution?
Well, I've sort of mentioned that I think income tax is the way to do it. The property tax still brings a lot of the burden down on the poor, and it is very different in different areas. My daughter-in-law worked for River Oak School in Houston, which is a wealthy neighborhood, and they had garage sales. Worked at a very poor area school. They had garage sales that raised $60,000 and $80,000 a year. Our PTA was lucky if it could raise $700 a year. We shouldn't have to depend on these outside forces. Education should be financed completely and thoroughly by the state. And I do believe that the real estate taxes are onerous and counterproductive. I think we need an income tax.
Mayor White, would you support a referendum for a statewide property tax?
Well, I don't think a new property tax statewide, I think is dead on arrival, a constitutional amendment, because our property taxes are already too high in this state. But I do believe that we need to take another look at school finance reform. What was done in 2006 has led to gross inequities. When we froze people and the differences that they had in 2006, when we have a growing population in the state in different areas with different needs, that's just not right. I know that the citizens of this state can find a way where we're not just reacting to court decisions, as Rick Perry has been done, but we take an active approach in making sure that every school is adequate, but there's no ceiling on what a school or school district could become with the support of the parents and the voters within that district. We haven't gotten that balance yet. We need to do so. And I'll tell you, there's another looming crisis in school finance, and that's what's been happening over at the Texas Teachers Retirement System. Just today, we helped blow the whistle on more insider deals, $600 million in fees that were charged, many by Perry donors. For that's about 6% of the total assets within a period of 2 years. And that difference eventually will either be made up by reduced benefits for teachers, which I think would be wrong for people who've already earned those, or increased taxes by our taxpayers. I think we need to clean house at the Texas Teachers Retirement System and make sure that politics never again influences how the investment decisions are made with teachers' retirement funds.
Ms. Glass, same question.
Statewide property tax, new business tax, income tax, no, no, no. We're taxed enough already, and it's not that we tax ourselves too little, it's that we spend too much. We should get rid of the property. You own your property, you're just renting it from the government. As long as, even though it's paid off, you have to pay this money or you'll lose your house in a foreclosure. But we have to find another way to fund our government schools, and this is what I propose. You eliminate this property tax, replace it with nothing at the state level, but the state continues to send monies to the school districts the way they do now. Currently, that's somewhere between $5,000 and maybe $8,000, but we figure out what it is per student, and that comes from the state directly to the school board. We return our schools to local control because that's where our public schools work best, when it was closer to the consumer, where parents and teachers and local school boards and voters could decide what they want, and because they know their students best and what works. Get rid of these mandates from Austin and Washington. Get rid of the test. The only reason we do these incessant testing of our children is because people far away want to know what's going on, and they're the ones making the decisions. If it's the people on the scene making the decisions, they don't need to do these tests, and we should make it clear all the impediments for local school districts to supplement what they get from the state with voter approval if they want to. Let them experiment, because one size fits all doesn't fit Texas.
Dave?
There's a growing nationwide movement to legalize the use of marijuana for medical purposes. Should that be allowed in Texas? Mayor White, you get the question first.
You know, no. I don't see that as being viable or desirable in our state. In general, in questions involving, you know, medical issues, instead of acting like Rick Perry when he circumvented the whole process for authorizing a vaccine, the HPV vaccine, based on the influence of lobbyists, I would defer to medical professionals concerning the drugs that should be legal, not legal, and what they should be prescribed to do. You know, we need to take a lot of the politics and posturing out of state government in this state. We need to make sure that health decisions are not made because some former chief of staff of the governor is a well-connected lobbyist, and then all of a sudden kids in the schools are required to be vaccinated by a drug that hasn't gone through the formal process of the state. And when we deal with what should be legal and not legal, it should be medical issues and an issue on which you talk to people within the criminal justice system. You'll find in other states they said legalization for medical purposes, but there's been a whole lot of abuses.
Mrs. Glass, I believe your party, the Libertarian Party, endorses that concept. Do you support that?
Well, if the legislature passed a law, a bill legalizing medical marijuana, putting it on my desk, I would sign it. But I have to question your assumption that this is something the people want and are working for. I don't see that in Texas. So I think that's a hypothetical situation that is not likely to occur in my tenure as governor. But I just say this. I've asked people to put aside their pet projects and their pet peeves to focus on the critical things that we need to get done, that we are largely united on, and that we can do right now, and focus on those. And people have been very responsive to that. And I don't see medical marijuana as being one of those core issues. But if the legislature, a conservative Republican legislature, passes it, I'd sign it.
Mrs. Shafter?
I have a different opinion. No surprise there. I think that all of drugs, marijuana and all of the hard drugs that are used, are responsible for the violence on the border that we see, the violence in Latin America that we see, that is spilling over into this country. And it is, if we didn't learn our lesson in Prohibition, then shame on us. Prohibition gave us the mafia, and we have not been able to get rid of it yet. They got their roots in so deep, they were so well funded, that they exist today. When we talk about illegal drugs, we're talking about making a market for black marketeers, for people who don't mind breaking the law. We need to use a medical model, medical for marijuana, medical for all kinds of drugs. And yes, there have been abuses. There's a case recently where a doctor's prescribing on a, a rip-off, pre-signed, pre-printed ad, hard drugs. We can deal with him. We can deal with those people. What we can't deal is with it when we put it completely against the law, because it's going to go on, and if you need proof, take a trip into the border country of Mexico.
Alberta, our next question.
Ms. Glass, a moment ago you spoke about critical issues, and this is a critical issue when we're talking about school dropout rates. The Texas Education Agency reports that 80.6% of 300,000 students in the class of 2009 graduated on time, while 8.6% continued in high school the following year, and 1.4% received GEDs. That means about 19 to 20% of the 2009 class either dropped out or didn't graduate from high school on time. Other groups such as ISRA in San Antonio say dropout rates are much higher, especially for minority students. The group said that 45% of Hispanic students left before graduating and 35% of black students dropped out, compared with 17% for white students. No matter whose figures that you believe, the result is that too many students are dropping out. So what specifically would you do as governor to swiftly and dramatically stem the tide of dropouts and increase the pool of high school graduates?
Well, I do question the validity of some of those statistics. But on the issue of what you do about dropouts, I think you just need to examine the fundamental question of why do these people not wish to partake of a free public education. Maybe they know something about what's best for them in their lives that we don't. So I'm opposed to truancy laws above a certain age. If a 16-year-old wants to drop out and his parents say that, just maybe he's making the best decision. We need to talk about what a truancy law means. It means you're acting as though you've got a product that is so bad you can't give it away. And your solution to that is to put the would-be consumer and his parents in jail? I don't think so. Let him go his own way if he's of that mind, because he's not getting anything out of the experience. That's pretty obvious. And let him go. Not only is he not benefiting from this education, more than likely that student is a disruptive force that is keeping that teacher from teaching the way she wants to, and other students who are there and want to learn from the ability to do so. So let him go. If he's made a mistake, ignorance can be cured, and he can take his whole life and turn it around, because this is not just a one-time thing that you have to get educated by a certain timetable in a certain way. People learn in different ways, and sometimes they learn better out on their own in real life than they do in a structured environment.
Thank you. Ms. Shafto, she says let them go. What do you say about stemming the tide of dropouts?
I am a retired teacher of many years. There is a lot wrong with our educational system, and it begins or is compounded by the testing that we do. We test children in kindergarten, and we decide right at that time who is capable and who is not. And my theory is that's as much an effect it causes the inability to learn as well as measuring it, or better than measuring it. What I'm concerned with is that we have these infants who are born learning machines. They learn, they learn, they learn, they learn. They learn enormous amounts, and then we get them in school, and the learning curve just drops. We're doing the wrong thing with them. We're being hard on them. And years when they should be jumping, running, laughing, playing, we're telling them to sit down, be quiet, no laughing, no talking. You passed the note. You don't want them to write? We're just being awful with them. And we need to review that. And it won't be a matter of overnight progress. It'll be a matter of training teachers to allow these children to learn as they can best learn without being so judgmental about them. Then you will solve the problem on your own. When you are, oops, time's up. Sorry.
Mayor White, what would you do about the dropout rate?
We ought to treat it as an emergency. Look, I've talked to so many people who dropped out of school once, and I haven't run into a single person who said, oh, that was a great decision that I made. And that tells you, we're asking people to make the most important decisions of their lifetime, perhaps, at a time where they're least likely to make that right decision. So I've been in the houses of people who've dropped out of school. We need to have more flexible schools. We need to make sure that work is compatible with attending school. That means hours on Saturdays and on weekends. We need to make sure that there's some facilities for the young mothers so that they could return to school and be able to get on with their education. We need to make sure that there's programs for early childhood education where people go into the class. When they enter the class, they have confidence in that first grade prepared. I would have signed that pre-K bill that had bipartisan support to expand opportunities for early childhood education, supported by the business community, vetoed by Rick Perry. What I wouldn't do is lie about the dropout figures, which our current governor has done. And then, He cut a program that worked on July 13th. It provided extra money for summer school and after-school tutoring. It was helping kids who were at risk remain in school. And the very same day, he proposed his new dropout program, which is a new law on driver's license. The problem was his new program had been state law since 1989, and he had been responsible for enforcing it since 2001. He didn't know or didn't care what the law was.
Our next question is being posed by Peggy.
Ms. Shafto, Texas faces a budget shortfall that some estimate at $21 billion or even more. Can you specify either cuts or revenue increases that would cover just $1 billion worth of that gap? And I know you favor an income tax, and if that's your answer, how would you build support for that idea? And one other part to the question, how much would you want to spend from the Rainy Day Fund, which is estimated to have $8.2 billion in it next year?
I would certainly, I don't have any idea for the Rainy Day Fund, and I've talked about the tax situation, and it would be difficult to get support for it, no question. Texans don't like the thought of tax, and there's no question about it. But these are people, particularly the top 20% of income earners, they've taken the most from society. Why should they not give back? Why are the poor expected to carry the whole burden? And I think that I can talk to people about that and get some agreement. What I would do right off is to run an audit of state jobs, and I would make sure that every single job that was on the state payroll was a job that needed being done and that was actually being done. It has been tradition for a number of years now to put your pals on the state payroll on a job that nobody checks, you don't check in, you just sort of do it maybe. And we can't afford it. We're over it. That's got to stop, and it has to stop right away.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Well, I'd start, you could get over $1 billion in savings if you had people looking at all these vendor contracts. So much of state government has been outsourced under Rick Perry, and so many of those contracts have later turned out to be incredible boondoggles because they were not awarded based on merit, but because that there were well-placed lobbyists. Look, the three drivers of cost in state government are vendor contracts, personnel costs, and capital expenditures. On personnel costs, you do what we did in the private sector. I did it when I was running businesses. When you see a problem coming down the line, recession coming, then you look at the people who are retiring and you do not, and you see what they were doing, and in most cases you can divide up some of those work among some or all of the remaining employees. That type of hands-on management has not gotten done. And you know there's waste in state government. TxDOT didn't even know, the Texas Department of Transportation did not even know its own budget within $1.1 billion 2 years ago. Anybody who doesn't know their budget within $1.1 billion, that's not a well-run organization. Just think about the smaller costs. And what we were dealing with today, if state government were run for public service and for efficiency by people who use business experience rather than being used as part of a political machine to gather campaign contributions, I'll tell you this, it wouldn't take $300 million a year in fees out of the teachers' retirement system to see the assets go down.
Ms. Glass?
Well, what we can cut is things I've said before. Taxpayer-funded services for non-citizens, that's $45 billion estimated right there. We can cut opt-out of Medicaid, which is another $45 billion plus, another 25% of our budget. We couldn't afford that before Obamacare, but Obamacare has increased the number of people who are entitled to Medicaid, basically opened it up to everybody and upped our liability 75%. We can afford that. Now, that would not be a dollar-for-dollar savings because we would take that money and use it to construct what it is that Texans want to provide by way of health care services for Texans, but it would not be what Washington dictates, and we would get better services at a lower price. We can cut everything. I don't think there's anything that we don't overspend on, including education. If we return to local control of education, people know where there's fat in education. They know they don't need those Taj Mahals and Taj Mahal stadiums, athletic facilities that a small college would envy. people on the scene know how they can cut responsibly in education, but also cut tech dot. They lose $1 billion, they misplace it like I misplaced my car keys. And I think that we could just get rid of that because I can't see any good coming of it. They want to force these toll roads on us, and of course we know the Trans-Texas corridor is not dead. It still exists in dormant form. Perhaps it'll come back alive to haunt us if Rick Perry gets back in office.
Alberta.
Thank you. Mayor White, this question goes, I guess, to Mayor White first. Today, I spoke with folks from the president from the Children's Hospital Association of Texas, and the organization is very concerned that cuts will be made to the Children's Health Insurance Program, the CHIP program, to balance the budget. That would hurt children and many children's hospitals across the state. Would you maintain or cut the program?
I'd maintain it, and there's a good reason to do that. And that is, this is a program that brings federal dollars in that to help our children be healthy, to deal with our sick children, where if we didn't have this kind of support for the programs, we would be dealing with those in the emergency rooms of various hospitals. And the cost of unreimbursed care, which is borne by providers throughout the state, whether it be physicians or hospitals, those costs of unreimbursed care, if they're not paid for by local property taxes, are built into the insurance premiums of others. That's why I would like to get our share of federal dollars, our hard-earned income tax dollars that we send to Washington and other taxes, back to Texas. Now, I do think there's ways that we can have our health care system be more efficient. When I was mayor of Houston, we expanded the number of community clinics because often you can do a better job of preventative care or catching something early if there's a clinic in the neighborhood, and it's a lot less costly than going to the hospital. I think that's the type of thing that we need to look at.
Ms. Glass, same question.
This gives me an opportunity to elaborate on my previous answer about opting out of Medicaid. But whenever you say we have to do this to get those federal dollars, that's a problem. That's a trap. We need to avoid that because those federal dollars are not free. Yes, you can say they took it from us and returned a small portion of it to us, but that's not even true anymore. Now they're just digital entries on a computer due to the Federal Reserve System. So there's going to come a day, because we all know, I hope, that the federal government is out of money. There's going to come a day when even what they are sending to us is going to stop. And that's why I say Texas has to get ready to stand strong on our own feet and do what we want by ourselves with our own money, not look to Washington for monies and not accept direction from them in these matters. If we opt out of Medicaid and we pull all of our various parts of the budget that have to do with health care and we decide what it is we want to spend, whether it's for children or veterans, or the elderly, or the disabled, we'll make those decisions. It will not be just what Washington dictates we will do with all the bureaucratic red tape. No, we'll make decisions. There'll be better decisions. There'll be harder decisions. But we will end up, I'm convinced, with better services at lower cost.
Ms. Shafto, same question.
I would like very much to have lower cost insurance, but not at the expense of even one child. And I don't care whether they're citizens or not citizens. A sick child is a sick child and merits care on its own. I would not cut the budgets for health care for children. I would do what Bill White has done in Houston, institute more local clinics so that it isn't the expensive kind of care. And I think that it's, to say that we don't want federal money is to say, that's our money. That's our money. Why would we not want to spend it on our children? Why would we take money from a different pocket to take care of the children unless we had no intention of taking care of the children?
We're going to shift gears right now and move to a lightning round where we're going to ask you a burst of quick questions and hope you'll give us some quick answers. This will start with Alberta putting a question to Ms. Shafto on the hot seat first.
Ms. Shafto, what law in Texas do you most want to repeal?
To repeal death penalty.
Well,
Which law? Ms.
Oh,
Shafto.
which law?
Yes,
Which
which law?
The law allowing people to be executed.
Mayor White?
there's a whole bunch, but most unfunded mandates on our local school districts that deprive them of control. I'll give you an example. I'd like to see a law repealed, the law repealed that didn't give local school districts flexibility in setting school calendars. Why should school calendars be dictated from Austin?
Ms. Glass.
Property tax.
Dave will ask the next question of Mayor White.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate Barack Obama's performance as president? Starting with you, Mayor White.
Well, I'm not going to give running commentary on our president, although I will call him as president when I talk about President Obama. I'm going to be doing everything that I can to work with people on both sides of the aisle in Washington to stick up for Texas. That means that we get our fair share of federal funds so they don't go to other states. That means we reduce the strings that are attached to federal funds. That means that from time to time, who is ever in the White House at any time, we fight for the facilities that are here in Texas that provide employment for Texans. And that includes NASA and the Red
Mayor
River
White,
Army
this is a
Depot.
lightning round. We're
Okay,
going
thank
to
you.
move on. Ms. Glass, 1 to 10.
Mrs. Glass, your turn. Scale of 1 to 10, President Obama.
1, but you didn't say which was highest or lowest.
Lowest is 1.
Okay, I'll stick with that. He's the
Okay.
worst president ever, and that's why we've got to get Texas strong and independent.
I would say around a 6.5, 7. I think he's trying and constrained by forces that aren't always obvious.
Peggy.
Ms. Glass, your favorite philosopher?
Ayn Rand. I named my daughter after her.
Ms. Shafter?
Ayn, not
Oh,
Rand.
gosh. I have to pass. I have to pass.
Mayor White?
Well, I'll tell you what, you know, I love, it's not so much philosophy, but St. Augustine after, you know, AD. But I'll tell you what, before then, Socrates had its moments.
Thank you.
Alberta.
Ms. Shafto, which beverage best describes your personality? Beer, wine, whiskey, or green tea?
Green tea.
Ms. Glass.
Wine, I guess.
Mayor.
Meet me afterwards. We'll talk about it.
Coffee isn't on there. But, oh, I don't know. Green tea, I suppose.
Dave.
What was the best advice you ever received from your parents? Mayor White, starting with you.
To look for a gift. My parents thought that every child had, and every human being has a special gift. To follow your bliss, find out what that gift is. You know, we all have some special talent out there, and it took me a while. And I hope that every person listening to this, and everybody, if they've endured this long, when they think about their own kids, I hope you let your own children know that each of them has something special to offer, and it's just a matter of discovering that.
Ms.
Mrs.
Glass.
Well, my mother said, yes, I should be a lawyer because then I would get paid to argue. and my daddy told me, don't go down with your bat on your shoulders.
And you followed both of them, I suppose.
Yes,
Yeah.
Ms. Shafto,
Ms.
please.
Shafto?
My mother was a single parent, and what she taught me was don't give up and give it your best.
Thank you very much. Contestants, you can put down your buzzers. We are now going to ask you for each to give us a 2-minute closing. We'd like to begin with Ms. Glass.
Well, to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world, if by now you're thinking that I really would be the best governor, but you're reluctant to vote for me because you think I can't win, this closing is for you. If we share the same goals, a secure border, push back on Washington, a sane budget, and death to the Trans-Texas corridor, I'm not just another choice you have for governor. I'm your only choice. We're in a battle for America, and Texas is the battleground. But we are not battle ready because we have no leader. Now, I know I've heard some of you say that you despise special interest money in politics. I mean, the wheeling and dealing that goes on. Well, we've seen the two top guys spend $50 million to persuade you that the other one is unfit for this office. I think they're both right. I've heard you say you're going to vote for somebody you don't really want. and you're going to hold his feet to the fire. Well, how's that been working for you for the last 10 years? It's, if you think that the incumbent will listen to you better for the next 4 years at his lame duck session, and better than he has for the last 10 years, you're delusional. And do you really want a governor, though, that you've got to watch like a 3-year-old boy around a book of matches? You got to watch it. If any party thinks they've got you in their hip pocket, you're going to be sat upon. You can vote and do whatever Rick Perry wants for him on November 2nd. But the next morning, November 3rd, he still won't respect you. So your vote, your one vote matters to you. It's important, and how it's interpreted is important. And a vote for the status quo for the incumbent will be interpreted as a vote for no change, and that's exactly what you'll get. Vote for Kathy Glass will be a vote for change. I'm not going away, even what happens in this election. I'm a fighter. I'm fighting for Texas, for America, for liberty. I will never retreat, never surrender, but I need ammunition.
Ms. Shafter.
Yes, I share some of the sentiment that Kathy expresses. I, too, am running because I see our state, our nation, our world in great danger. I want to words failed. I want to construct a different kind of world. I want to construct a world where we care about each other, where we get back to the human feelings that we all have for each other underneath, where what car you drive isn't as important as how close you are to your neighbor, where the money you make is not as important as your relationship with the community and how you support others who have less. I want to support a world where we care for our environment. Texas can take the lead in this, and I urge you not to vote your fears, but to vote your hopes. We need absolutely to vote for the candidate who best expresses your hopes and desires. For too long, Texans have voted for the person they think is going to be the winner, which is really throwing your vote away. Many of our green values are values of human values. I urge you all, no matter how you cast your ballot, to look at them and to operate your lives by them. Thank you.
Mr. White.
I love this state. I love its people, its diversity. I love its terrain. I like its accents. I like its food. This has been a great experience for me and my family, and we've learned something about Texans. We are very decent people, and Texans are ready for a new governor. I'm asking the people who love this state, and I can tell you love it because you listen to this debate and watch this debate and are listening to these closings, to help us move this state forward. We're a great state of opportunity. We always have been, but we'll never be as good as we can be if we're 49 out of 50 states and the percentage of adults with a high school diploma. We'll never be as good as we can be with college tuition going sky high and getting out of the grasp of middle-class families. I want to bring decency to state government and bring people together to get things done. We have 14 days until we just choose a new governor in this state. I ask everybody out there to have an impact, to go vote. I'm asking for your vote and more. I'm asking you to go on my website, BillWhiteForTexas.com. See how you can get involved. Get involved with people who are from the Democratic Party, Independents, Republicans, and no party at all, who want this state to move forward. We have a choice in this election. You know, the pundits say that many people will stay at home, but that gives those who care an opportunity to express themselves. There are people right now fighting halfway across the world in uniform for the greatest democracy, the greatest country this world has ever produced. And part of that greatness is the fact that while Rick Perry and his friends can run the state over the last several years, during times when polls are open, you can decide the direction of this state. Get involved, get out the vote, get others to do so, and we can be proud of Texas in our future.
Thank you, candidates. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of tonight's debate, the Houston Chronicle, the Dallas Morning News, San Antonio Express News, Fort Worth Star Telegram, the Austin American-Statesman, as well as KLRU TV and KUT Radio. Early voting began yesterday and continues through October 29th. Or go out and vote on November 2nd. Thank you for watching, and good night.